All right, looks like we are at exactly 2 minutes past, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for everyone joining us today. For some of you, I'm seeing you for the second day in the row. For those who joined us yesterday for yesterday's first installation in this three-part series, today is all about elevating your website with user experience. So I'm Karen Gordon. I'm your host today. I have the easy job today after presenting yesterday. All I have to do is welcome you all. I'm Karen Gordon. I'm the VP of Growth here at Good Shuffle Pro. And although we are the hosts today, today's presentation is actually by our wonderful guest, Christy Glassick, the owner of Glassick UX, who also happens to be a dear friend of mine. So I am thrilled to have her here today. And for folks who are joining us and have questions as we go along, one of my only jobs as the host today is to moderate those. So please go ahead, send them in the Q&A, send them in the chat. I'm going to keep an eye on those as we go along. I'm going to do my best not to interrupt Christy unless there's anything absolutely burning about one of the slides. And what we'll do is instead, after she's gone through her presentation, at the end, we'll go through all of the questions. And that'll be a great time to ask her questions about UX as it pertains to your business and your website. So without further ado, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen and go ahead and hand it over to Christy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Let me just get set up right here.
And I do have a question already coming in about someone asking about sharing yesterday's presentation. And yes, everyone who's registered will receive all 3 recordings by the end of the week. So we'll keep a lookout for that email. That will be coming hopefully tomorrow, if not Friday.
All right. So thank you so much for having me today. Thank you to Good Shuffle for the invitation. As Karen mentioned, my name is Christy Glassick. I am the founder and the owner of Glassick UX. I've been practicing user experience for about 4.5 years now in many different roles, everything ranging from user research and discovery activities through website and interface design, and also into front-end development as well, but we're not going to cover that today. Today, I'm going to share with you some basics about user experience, otherwise known as UX. I'm going to give you some background, some notable principles, some activities that you can take back to your own business to kickstart improving your own website's user experience. And we're also going to have some time at the end to review some additional resources that I'm going to give to you, and also to have some Q&A to get some questions from you all. So to kick things off today, let's dive right in and talk about what UX actually is and how it affects your business. This first section is going to be dedicated to sort of covering the background of UX and trying to understand where it came from and what the purpose is. So the definition is the overall experience of a person using a product, such as a website or computer application, especially in terms of how easy or pleasing it is to use. You might have heard of user experience before. It's been sort of a trendy term in the last decade in the web world, but it's been around for a long while now. The UX movement was actually founded by a group of forward thinkers who began to ask questions about how products, both tactile and digital, were being designed and why. They started to ask questions like, why aren't they being designed for the user's needs? Back then, we're talking a couple of decades ago, back then, the sort of standard was for web experiences to be thrown together. They were thrown together effort, and often it was sort of the expectation that the user would learn to use the website or learn to use the product, or they would fail at their task. And that was just sort of how it was. But this group of forward thinkers decided to flip the script. They decided to start asking the important question, what if products were designed based on the user instead of vice versa? So asking this question is sort of what led to what we now know as user experience or UX design, which is a field that, again, as you probably know, has been booming in the last decade and has become a truly integral part of the product development pipeline. In full practice, user experience encompasses just a ton of things. This is just a smattering of what it actually encompasses. These are sort of terms that are typically associated with UX. However, Today, just to keep things simple, since we only have an hour together, we're just going to talk about user experience as one holistic concept. So the big question is, how does this affect your business? I like to answer this question by reminding folks of what my business's tagline is. That tagline is, "The world is watching." And "the world is watching" sounds kind of ominous. It sounds a little bit Big Brother-esque, but really it gets the point across. Your website is your face to the entire world. Anybody can access your website. And the way that you present yourself is often going to form their first impression of you. It's going to form their opinions. If your website isn't well maintained, can they trust you as a vendor, as a business partner? These are questions that you should ask yourself when you're thinking about how UX can affect your business. Most of your potential clients or your customers are going to view your website either before they even talk to you or meet you, or early on in your business relationship. So it's really important to put the time and effort into maintaining a website that's easy and intuitive to use. You want them to be impressed and delighted by what they find when they go to your website. So, you know the importance of creating a clean and polished and professional image in person. You want to do the same. You want to take care of that web presence. It's an opportunity for you to put your best foot forward. And there are a number of benefits to performing UX activities. Some of these are a low barrier to entry. User experience activities are inherently empathetic activities that usually don't cost a lot of money. You don't need to throw a big budget at a project. You don't have to hire a fancy firm. You don't have to expand your staff. All you really need is someone who's really interested in learning these activities and the basics of UX to get started. It's also a high return on investment. As I mentioned, you don't need a big budget. You don't need to throw a lot of money at this. It can be something where even the smallest activities can inform big, impactful changes on your website that are going to get you more inquiries from your clients, more contact forms, more leads, more interest, and more engagement on your website. It's also an opportunity for continual improvement. One of my favorite things about user experience is that it's not a one and done, I've finished this project, I'm wiping my hands of it sort of field. It's something where you're continually looking for opportunities to improve on your website, to make things better, even if it's just a little bit at a time. It's sort of a long-term commitment. And lastly, as I alluded to before, anybody can improve UX. It doesn't take a degree, it doesn't take a ton of education. All it takes is an interest, some reading, some research, and then applying what you've learned to really get started in UX. So, we're going to move right into our basic principles of user experience. Now, there are way more principles than I'm going to cover today, but in the interest of time, I've picked out a few that I think are pretty integral to the process. So we're going to cover those today. So the first one we've got here is design for your users. The second is consistency. The third is clarity. And the final is less is more. Our first principle, design for your users. If you've ever dabbled in UX or read about anything related, you've probably heard this before, but it's sort of considered the UX golden rule. Your website should always be designed for your users and not for yourself. Remember, even though it is your website, you're not designing it so that you can use it. You are familiar with it. You know where the content lives and how it functions. You want to make sure that when you're designing your website, you're thinking about the user and how they might be navigating it. So in addition to that, everyone will inevitably have personal opinions about how things should be styled and how they should function and how they should be laid out. But it's extremely important to continually ask yourself, is this what the users are going to expect? Or does this just make sense to me because I'm familiar with it? That's going to help you build out your website to make sure that it's easier for your users to understand the design and find the information that they're looking for. Another tip is consistency. So consistency, if you've ever dabbled in marketing before, then you've probably heard the old cliche that content is king. Well, in UX, consistency is king. Being consistent in your website allows you to sort of set expectations for your users from the start and then maintain those standards throughout the website so that it's easier for them to navigate. Once they start to notice the elements that are similar, all of the buttons look similar, all of the layouts are consistent. These sorts of things make it easy for the user to focus on content and less on trying to figure out how to work the website. Doing so also tends to build trust with users. It makes the website easier to navigate, and so it allows them to feel like they can trust you, like they know what's going to happen, they know what's clickable, they know what styles are consistent across the board and what sections, or what dictates a section. A couple of examples that I've said here are using preset button styles. This is a really important one. It gives the user an intuitive, quick cue as to what is a call to action. Using consistent text styles to establish a visual hierarchy, making sure that you're consistent in your use of headers, the size of your headers, the size of your body text, the size of your captions. Things like that are going to become very important. And another example is elements that are grouped together should share the same styles. So for example, if you have on your website 3 packages and you have them set up in 3 different cards, all of those cards should look and react the same. That sort of helps the user to understand without having to think too hard that these are all similar elements that are grouped together. These are just examples. There are, of course, many other ways that you can improve the consistency across your website. Also, we've got clarity as one of our principles. This is a really interesting one. You just really want your website, your goal with your website is for it to be as obvious and clear as possible. You never want your user to ask themselves what something means, or, you know, if I click this, what's going to happen? Or am I submitting something? Am I losing progress on a form? You never want your users to have those sorts of thought processes. If you're familiar with psychology, you've probably heard this term before, cognitive load. In psychology, the definition is the amount of working memory resources used. However, UXers have sort of hijacked that phrase a little bit and started to apply it pretty heavily to our work. In UX, when you're talking about cognitive load, you're really describing how much mental energy your user is going to have to put forth to accomplish a task or to navigate your website. And the important thing to know there is that reduced cognitive load is good. This should always be a priority. You want to make things as simple as possible for your users. You never want to make them think too hard about how to navigate or work your website. It's also going to allow your user to spend more time focusing on the content. If your user is on your website and they can't figure out how to get from A to B or how to find the information they're looking for, then they get frustrated. Taking the time to actually design things so that you're reducing their cognitive load is going to allow them to take more time to actually focus on what you've put on your website instead of getting distracted by how it functions and how they're supposed to navigate. Because of that, it also tends to drive user action. If they're able to go to your website, they're able to get the information they need quickly and efficiently, then they're more likely to take action, to fill out a contact form so that you have a new lead, to book something with you. And overall, it just makes for a more pleasant experience and reduces frustration. I feel like we've all been there where you've been to a website and you're clicking around and you can't find what you want and you just feel that just urge to throw your computer out the window. We just want to make sure that that never happens with your website. One of the easiest ways to do this is to be clear and concise with your language and your calls to action. There are definitely opportunities for you to let your personality show through and to demonstrate your brand through creative language on your website. However, there's a time and a place for it. So for the creative opportunities that I've listed here are just some examples. So you can use a catchy headline to demonstrate your brand personality. Maybe you're a fun and hip brand or something like that. You can use a headline, maybe over a nice designed hero on your homepage, to let that shine through. You can also use marketing body copy on your pages as well. As long as you're still being clear about the take-home points about those calls to action, you can use that as an opportunity to get creative. However, there are instances in which you really don't want to be using creative language. I like to think of these, these things that you're focusing on clarity on. These are really things that are related to the functionality of your website, the way that it works. So the things that allow you to be a little bit more creative are, the copy side of things, the headlines. But when it comes to functionality, you want to be very straightforward, because these cues are communicating with your users about how to use your website. So here we have navigation. That's a really good example of one. You want to make sure that in your main navigation, you have everything listed so that it's intuitive, so that the user knows exactly what's behind it. That's not an opportunity to say, if you have a special package or something called Winter Wonderland and you want to feature it, that's not something you want to put in your navigation. It's going to be very difficult for users to understand what lies behind that link. Labels are another example. I frequently see with clients people using their own sort of lingo, their own internal culture language to label things in a way that they think builds character with their brand. However, I find often with users, it can be very confusing. What does this label mean? It's not something that is in my vocabulary per se. So you really want to steer clear of using creative or cutesy language with labels. Buttons are one that I think is pretty well established. You want your buttons to be clear. Where is it going to take me? What action am I taking if I'm going to click this? And of course, calls to action. I'm going to touch back on this later in the presentation to talk about how you can really write effective calls to action and links, the steps that you can take. But that is another instance in which you don't necessarily want to be too creative. You want to be very straightforward and clear with your user about what actions they're taking. Here's a really good example. It's very simple, but it gets the point across. Sometimes you'll see on a website something like need to finish later, which from a marketing perspective might come across as sort of laid back and casual and give that sort of persona. However, if you're a user and you're seeing a button that says need to finish later, what does that tell you? Does that say, I need to finish later, so if I click this, it's going to save for me? Or does it say, I'm going to divert away from this page and it's going to send me elsewhere? It's not very clear what's going to happen if you're going to click that button. So a better option would be a really crystal clear version that says save for later, that ensures that the user knows that if they click that button and then they leave that page, their progress isn't going to be lost. Less is more, our final principle that we're going to explore today.
Christy, I will say that is very in line for those who were on yesterday's webinar. It's very in line with what I said about not being too creative with your titles or your company description, because it kills your SEO. And I gave that example, some might remember, of an event planner I knew who called his title conductor instead of planner or production manager. And I said, who's out there Googling best conductor when they're trying to plan an event? So it's very similar from a UX principle. They tie in together that, creativity in events is a beautiful thing, but creativity on your website is actually very confusing.
Yes, very good point. Very good point. It may feel like you're building, often I find it makes it feel like you're building your own internal culture, but it is internal. So, when you use that sort of language, it means something to your team, but it doesn't mean anything to potential clients. You just want to be very mindful of that. So less is more. This quote here, if you decide to explore user experience a little bit more after we're finished today, I guarantee you're going to see this quote in a lot of places. It's very popular. Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. It's almost cliche now in UX to use this, but the point stands. Most users are not going to read your website. It's just the sad truth. They scan them. In UX, we often observe what's called an F pattern, where they start at the top, they move down a little bit like that. I'm doing this backwards. There we go. So an F pattern, you get the idea. So most users will just scan your website looking for the content that they came for, or just sort of browsing through it casually. So you want to make sure that when you're adding content to your website, it's carefully curated. You're really thinking about what's important to put on the page, really drawing attention to the things that are going to get your user to take the action, the desired action. And you also want to pay attention to the layout of your website. Giving your overloading these pages with headlines and text and images and buttons and forms and widgets and what have you can become visually overwhelming very quickly. So you want to make sure to focus on what's important, get that up front, and trim the rest. Another point with less is more is also that you also want your content to breathe. That's something that I often see with websites is that there's not, it's a lot of content, even if it's well curated, a lot of it is sort of pushed together, sort of forced together. But if you move things apart, even just a little bit, you'll start to notice that there's more breathing room on your page. It's easier for people to digest when they have nice, clean sections. All right. Karen, do we have any questions, or are we good to go for section 3?
We are good to go, but folks, feel free to ask those questions. Again, we'll go over a bunch of questions at the end, but if there's anything you want to ask us, we're moving along. Sorry, we do have one. Sorry, what does SOE terminology represent? We want to go back. When did that come in? Maybe go back one slide. We've got, not sure what they're referring to here. Oh, I think they're saying SEO. What does SEO, we're talking about SEO. I see. Sorry, we have things coming in rapid fire. Search engine optimization. So we're going to have a deep dive on search engine optimization tomorrow. But yes, when we're referencing how things can hurt your SEO, search engine optimization means optimizing your website so you show higher in search results. So if you were, again, the example I gave of a conductor, if I'm searching for on Google, I want to find an event professional in my area, you need to think about the search engine is going to pull from the different websites. It's all the bots that crawl your website and help Google give us awesome results when I'm searching something like most delicious restaurant near me. You want to optimize your website for those results as well as having a great experience in terms of the UX. So today, more on the design, but if you want to learn a little bit more about that search engine optimization for your website, that will be tomorrow's session at the same time.
Alrighty.
And thank you for the tag team of people jumping in saying that meant SEO. I was wondering what SEO meant.
All right, so now we're gonna dive into the applicable stuff. Now that we have that basis, that good idea of some of the basic concepts and principles, again, just a handful, just a little taste of the principles of user experience. I'd like to talk to you about 6 ways that you can start to improve your own website's user experience. Again, as I said before, I cannot reiterate enough. You do not need a big budget. You don't need a big team. You don't need to hire specialists necessarily. And you don't need a ton of staff time to do these. You can sort of do these at your leisure. One that I'm particularly passionate about is checking your text contrast. This is a huge no-no in terms of website design. You want to make sure that if you're going to go to the trouble of adding text to your website, especially in cases where it's overlaid over an image or a background, that it's visible and highly visible. This is sort of a rudimentary example right here. This is probably not something you'd actually see on a website, but you get the idea. That when there isn't enough contrast between the text and the image or the background, it's really hard to see and it's really easy to miss. So you want to use text contrast wisely to make sure that your users can read everything that's on the page, even if that means that you're going to have to make some aesthetic adjustments. Even if that means you might have to make the image a little bit darker than you'd like or a little bit lighter, or change the text color a little bit, it will be worth it in the long run. This is also, as an aside, considered a best practice in terms of accessibility. I won't get into accessibility today because we don't have time, but it's worth looking into in regards to your website. You want to make sure that users that have visual impairments can use your website, can read things, can still have access to the same content that someone without visual impairments has. In addition, you can also use text contrast in creative ways. So you can use text contrast to bring out certain parts of your page that are the most important and draw your users' eyes to those using colors, using bolded fonts and such to try to build the storyline as your user navigates your page. Our second way is to create better links and calls to action. So I alluded to this before, now we're going to dive into it. This might seem like something that is more of a marketing concept because CTAs are often, calls to action are often associated with marketing efforts, but it does have its place in user experience as well. Writing good links and calls to action, they help the user understand what they can expect if they're going to click on that link or CTA. So here are 4 ways that you can write better links or CTAs. First of all, you want to be specific. We use text links to communicate with our users about what they can expect if they navigate to another page. So you want to make sure that if you're going to give them that context, you're going to communicate with them, that you're using language that's specific enough that you're following through on what you've promised in that link. So a good example here, one that you see all over the web all the time, is learn more. Learn more is very vague. Learn more about what? It may pertain to a certain part of the web page that they've already explored. It could pertain to several parts. It's not specific enough for a user to click on it and necessarily understand exactly what they're going to find on the other end. So what if we wrote it a little bit differently? What if we wrote that link as learn more about our fall specials? That's much better. It's a much stronger statement. They know exactly what they're going to find if they click that link. Some other examples of vague language that are frequently seen online are things like read more or view or things like that. You just want to try very hard to be as specific as you can without being verbose. The second tip is to be transparent. Often you'll hear in user experience that a link is a promise. You're promising your users that if they click on this link, they're going to get access to the content as they'd expect. So when you're being transparent, if a user clicks on your link or your CTA, you want to make sure that you're delivering what they were expecting. For example, if you have a call to action that says view our fall specials, let's go back to the fall specials example. It should lead to a page or a light box or something like that that has a listing of your fall specials. It should not lead to a contact form that has to be filled out and submitted prior to accessing the information that they were promised. If you want that lead, if you want them to fill out that contact form in order to view the fall specials, then be transparent about it from the start. On that link, say, contact us for fall specials, then they can fill out the form and view the page. I realize that's not going to be very popular with the marketing crowd because it might diminish the lead generation, but it will help to instill trust in your users. A lot of folks get really frustrated if they have to fill out forms in order to access information that they thought that they could get otherwise. Using strong language is also very important. When writing a CTA or a link, you want to make sure that in addition to the 2 above, being transparent and being specific, you're also making a strong statement. This especially stands for when you're using links within text. You want to have a link that can stand on its own. So for example, if you added a link that said planning a wedding, okay, that's kind of vague. What about planning a wedding? But you could transform that to use our wedding vendor checklist to begin planning your wedding, or something to that effect. Something that's a little bit more detailed about what lies behind that link. Using that strong language and having it stand alone means that the user doesn't have to rely on additional context to figure out what it's going to mean. And finally, make it to the point. With this one, again, this sort of rides on the other 3 points that I've made before, but with this one, you do want to be as concise as possible without losing the meaning and without losing that transparency. So you want to make sure that they're concise and you're getting your point across and they have enough information and that they're informed and can decide whether or not they want to click it. Another thing you can do is to review your navigation. This is sort of a big one. Navigation, if someone isn't relying on search, a lot of websites don't have search, surprisingly. And if you're expecting the user to rely on your navigation, you want to try to make it as foolproof as possible. So you want to ask yourself, when looking at your own website, are these page titles and the navigation clear? If I was visiting my webpage for the first time, would I understand what lies behind that link on that page based on that description? You also want to make sure that it accurately represents what's on the page. Again, if I click on this link, is it going to take me to what I expect? Are there duplicative items in your menu? This is something I see often where people can't decide which bucket a page falls into, so they put it in both. However, if you sit back and look at it from a user perspective, that can be very confusing. Why are they in two different menu items? Are they different pages? Is there different content? I see it happen a lot. Make sure that if you're adding a page, it's only living in one place in your navigation. And then making sure that your subpages are appropriate. Making sure that everything is grouped appropriately so that if someone is looking for a specific piece of content, they know where it belongs. Running your own site audit is yet another way that you can improve your site's UX. When you're running your own site audit, this is going to be really difficult the first time, but with practice, it'll get a lot easier. You want to sit back, you want to look at your website as if you are a user. You want to forget that you know where everything lives on the website. You want to forget you know how it functions. It's a great idea to just click through your website and take notes with fresh eyes. And then it's going to help you discover the pain points and the frustrations that your users may be noticing, but maybe you don't because you already know how it works. So you want to note things like outdated content, duplicative content and language, broken links, formatting issues, inconsistencies in text styling and image styling, outdated information. So these are all sorts of things that you're going to want to just jot down, and that's going to set the basis for improvements to your website. You can take all of these notes, prioritize, decide what needs to be fixed and in what order. This is my favorite one, performing a quick user test. In user experience, one of our big jobs is to perform usability testing, which usually entails sitting down with a handful of users and having them perform tasks on a website while you sit back and you take notes. You're sort of a silent observer. When you do this, you ask the user to speak out loud as they're performing the actions on the website so that you can understand not just what they're doing, you're not just watching what they're doing, you're understanding more about why they're doing it. This is especially important when you come across pain points, when a user gets stuck on a page or it gets stuck on a task. Hearing them talk through why it wasn't reacting the way that they expected allows you to put together a plan to fix such problems. So when you're doing your own mini user test, I would recommend finding a family member, a colleague, or a friend who isn't very familiar with the website, who wouldn't know how to navigate it otherwise, and then ask them to click around on the website and verbalize their feedback as they're moving through it. They should explain exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it, why they clicked here, what they expected to be under X navigation item, what they expected to be on Y page that wasn't there, whether a contact form is confusing or has duplicative questions. These are all things that you want to hear as they're moving through the test. So you're going to write down, as the performer, as the auditor, you're going to write down the questions and the pain points as they ask them. And that's going to set the basis for a plan for improvements to try to address these issues that your users are having behind closed doors in their own house that you're not seeing on a regular basis. You'll be amazed. You really will be amazed by what you find out when you get some fresh eyes on your website. Things that you never thought of before that you did not think were a problem will quickly surface. And it's a great way to get immediate and actionable feedback that you can turn into improvements on your website. And lastly, note your experiences. This one, you're going to love me and hate me for it later, because once you start doing it, it's hard not to. You want to start to pay attention to your own experiences on other websites. This in particular, I like to say, works the best when you're looking at competitors' websites as well, a sort of mini competitor analysis. But when you're looking at other websites or experiences in general, even any sort of user-faced experience, you want to start to pay attention while you're browsing the website or while you're interacting with it, and start to ask yourself these questions internally. Sort of what's frustrating you about this experience, if anything? What improvements could they make to their site to make those frustrations go away? And do they apply to your website? Is it something that you can take and use on your own? What do they do well? What sort of experiences delighted you? What made you happy that you were on their website and happy to interact with it? And how can you learn from them? It doesn't all have to be negative, but the negative pieces will jump out at you real quick. But you can take all of this information, just sort of quietly observing what others are doing and how you feel when you're interacting with their products, and apply these lessons to your own website and make improvements. This is sort of just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to UX. It is a broad field with a lot of subsections, and I highly encourage you to continue to learn more about it, to give these tips and tricks a try, to see if it's for you, to see how it improves your business and your online presence, and to continue your journey on UX. I have a couple of additional resources here to share with you today. These are, you could just Google UX and a million things come up, but these are some trusted resources of mine. The Nielsen Norman Group is founded by two of those forward thinkers that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, and they are heavily research-based. So they do a lot of blogs and videos and articles and things like that, but most of it is based on research that they're doing. They also offer a number of online courses that you can take if you want to explore further. Some of these are mostly articles and blogs and doing sort of tips and tricks. General Assembly is a great resource if you're looking for maybe a one-day workshop, or if you're really interested in diving into user experience, doing one of their in-person normally, not right now, but they have online workshops that you can do, or longer programs for 12 weeks or intensive programs as well. So with that, I'm going to send Karen and Good Shuffle a link to a page that's going to have all of these notes written out for you, including these additional resource links so that you can access them later. I know it can be frustrating at times to listen to a presentation to try to get it all down, but know that you missed some things. So I'm going to go ahead and put together a web page for you on my personal website, glassicux.com, and I will send that to Karen to distribute to the group so that you all have those notes at your disposal. So I'd like to thank Karen and Good Shuffle for having me today. I'd like to thank you all for joining. I hope you learned something and that you can take some of these action items back to your own businesses to start your improvement plans.
Great. Well, Christy, we have some questions that are starting to come in, and I want to encourage people to continue to send in your questions. You can send them in the Q&A. You can also send them in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and walk through a couple of the questions now. We've already got one that is about search bar. Is it okay to put a search bar in the header of your page?
Absolutely, 100%. When it comes to search bars, those are kind of tricky because there have been a lot of designs over the years that have interfered a little bit with usability. So sometimes you'll go to a website and you'll see like a little tiny magnifying glass in the corner, or something to that effect. Really, your search bar does belong in your header. It does, typically in the upper right-hand corner. So most websites will have it up in that corner and users know to expect it there. The absolute best UX practice is to have a box. It makes it a little bit easier for a lot of reasons. But having a box there is a really big cue for people so they don't have to look for the icon, or maybe people don't understand what the icon even means. So adding a little box in your header is going to be fantastic for your website. That's a great idea.
Awesome. And people are asking about the ideal font and size of font for your website.
You want to have a pretty drastic, I'm going to refer you to Google's material design for best practices. I will send that link out I'll make a note to send that link out with the other notes. But that is an excellent point, because one of the biggest mistakes that I see on websites is people getting too small with their font. There are two different things that I'll refer you to in that email that are in the webpage that I'm going to provide for you. But the first is the material design, which has sort of best practices in terms of header 1, header 2, header 3, etc. There are usually 6 header sizes for any website. And then you have body text, you have caption text, and then you have like button text. And you want all of these to be big enough that they're legible. Obviously, you start with header 1 being the largest, and then you sort of trim down the size as you go, or style a little bit differently. But for body text, best practice is over 14 pixels. That's the minimum. I personally tend to go more towards 16.
Great.
Oh, and the other the other resource I was going to point you to on that page that I'll make sure to call out is a golden ratio calculator. The golden ratio calculator is you basically put in your font, you put in what it's being used for. It's being used for body text, or it's being used for a headline, and it helps you to calculate the ideal line height. So line height in your text is just the spacing between the 2 lines. And a lot of folks don't pay much attention to it, so the text kind of comes across as squished and difficult to read. But if you use the golden ratio calculator, a lot of times it'll give you an awesome recommendation for how far apart that text should be for optimal legibility.
Always prefer a calculator over the guessing game.
It does the work for you.
Any other questions? I will go ahead and put a plug in case there's any other questions in the meantime of tomorrow's webinar, as we talked about, is SEO, search engine optimization, extremely important. This is how people are finding your website. So now that you're going to go home and make all of the changes that I suggested yesterday, and you're going to spruce up your UX based on Christy's advice today, the worst thing you can do is then not have your website get discovered. So we're going to be diving into how you actually get people to get on your website through some wonderful SEO tips from my colleague Carmen tomorrow. So I hope you all join us for that as well. And I haven't seen any other questions come through, so I do want to give another big thank you, Christy, for your time, your expertise. This was wonderful. It really is so helpful. I think a lot of folks have said to me in the past that they thought UX sounded like some wildly technical thing that they just didn't need to know about. And I think, you know, as you illustrated today, this is about the experience that people have when they first come to your website, which is the first interaction most people have with your business and the most important. So I think, you know, this is all really important for businesses of all sizes. And I hope everyone will take this advice. And also I want to go ahead and share your contact information again, so people know to get in touch with you, because as you said, this is a lot to really advancing your UX. So once everyone's taken kind of the tips and tricks today, if they want to take it a step further, I hope they know they can reach out directly to you as well.
Always happy to answer questions. I could talk about UX for hours. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have another person asking about the live recording. We will have all 3 recordings sent to everyone who registered by the end of the week. This is a nice time for me to confess that I didn't record yesterday's webinar, and so I had to re-record it. So it's missing the Q&A at the end, which my colleagues will never let me hear the end of, I'm sure. But yes, you will get a recording of all 3 of these by the end of the week.